Good Friday morning, and welcome to Ice Age TV. Come on, puppers. Come on back here on this rainy Friday, gloomy, overcast, chilly day. Yes, it's still chilly. It's still cool up here, and so it is a chilly day, and it's drizzling. But it's just that time of the year in this area where it just kind of tends to be what it is. But we need the rain for sure. But I'm all geared up for all the coolness, so I stay warm throughout the day for the most part. Let's get over here and get the morning going. And sadly, for my family, we lost my mother at 2:50 a.m. this morning in Florida. So I received a text early this morning that my mother has passed at the ripe age of 92 years old. Wow. My mother lived 92 years. That's quite an accomplishment, everybody. It really is quite the accomplishment to live in this physical world. This is the same old thing I put up with this property. Somebody goes down there and they just decide to park their car, and just, what are they doing? Why are they there in front of my property? So let me get the dogs in the house and get the morning going and see the crazies here as we'll have to turn off the phone here in a second and come back right to see and talk more about my mother and the days ahead. Come on, keep it going. Go that way. Go that way, everybody. Go to the barn. Don't be looking the other way where the truck is down there, the car is down there. It's going to distract everybody, so just keep going to the barn. Oh, my goodness gracious. Yeah, so for the family today, sorrow for the family. But I think in life, you have to take it as a celebration. And I was blessed to have a mother that raised me, who was the most loving, kindest person in the earth to me. Which I hope that most here could say the same, but sadly, that's not true. Many people in this world where mothers have shamed their children, and it's been a different story. But I've been blessed. We're a very godly family, a very Christian family that has always been loving and caring and is taking care of each other. And we've been blessed in that way. So here, where to put my control? Come on, don't do that. Come on. Mary, where's the big dogs? Always something going on. Well, Tango, get these guys in. Julie and I cleaned up the shop yesterday, and it's just so much nicer. And I really do want to clean up more. Come on, Willow. As usual, Willow's late to the scene. The horn dog that chases now Gypsy. Like, never seen Willow be that attracted to another female dog. Come on, is everybody here? Everybody's here except Willow, so Willow can just stay outside. I don't really matter. He doesn't really bother me if he does stay outside, per se. He'll just bark and everybody else riled up. But he's up to something. But anyways, here we are, getting the dogs fed. And kind of got a late morning start here. Just reading all the texts from the family and just kind of saying prayers for my family and my mother. And just kind of taking it in stride when you lose somebody that's been in your life. For me, 62 years. I was with my mother for 62 years. Which that's some, quite the accomplishment. People know that there's so many people out there that have stories that lost their parents very young, or their parents separated, and the parents literally, one stayed around to raise you, the other one left. And, I know all these stories. I have personal stories in a family that's happened. So it's quite incredible how Micah, my nephew, never knew his father because he ran away and never took responsibility for him. And what's incredible is Micah was always concerned when he was in prison. That was my nephew that died in his motorcycle in Florida back, what was that year, everybody? 2022? I think that was 2022 or 2023. I just can't keep track. Of right after my mother's birthday, February 6th. And, but he was always talked about how he was always wanting to get out of prison and see my mother before she passed. Ironically enough, he was someone that passed before my mother passed. So for my mother, she was blessed that she did raise 4 children, and they all lived, and we outlived her. Because there's many stories of hardships of families where the mother and father have lost a child. I wouldn't even want to think about it. I don't even know how you deal with that. And I give my sister credit Rachel, who handled the death of Micah extremely well. I mean, very, she's fortunate to have two other children, but just the devastation of losing your child. You saw how I freaking freaked out just losing Q for a dog. Now, for my mother, I haven't really lived with my mother really since the 80s. So it's been for me a separation from my mother as far as living under her roof, for really 40 years. I would have to say roughly. And then my mother and father and brother and sisters all moved south back in the early 90s. And then I was here all by myself. So I lost, in some ways, a real close relationship being on a physical plane. Don't you just love that ball? Does it drive you nutty? It does. But it as far as me interacting with my mother on a daily basis, my father, hey, Prince, that really just is obnoxious. But being on a more physical relationship with my mother and father, it became more of a distant relationship. And for me, just getting my career going and getting my life in order and getting married my first time, I got through that. Everybody knows when you grow up in your family and everybody moves away, that is kind of challenging. But I got through that. But the point really is that the connection with my mother is always, now more than ever, a spiritual connection. But the daily connection being with my mother, that went away many years ago. So for my father, I feel for my father because he's 70 plus years married to my mother. Wow. 70 plus years. So for my father, the routine of his life is gone. And I just feel sorry for my father and the sorrow for my father because it'll be the hardest hit because he had a soulmate in his life that he connected with, which that's not easy finding that in this physical world we live in. And he did find that, and he was blessed to have such a beautiful wife, and who then was a mother to 4 children that endured a lot and sacrificed a lot. And that's the thing. It's interesting that last night I thought to myself, today I think the word should be sacrifice, not knowing my mother would pass at 2:50 a.m. this morning there in Florida in hospice. But we knew her time was coming to an end. My brother was texting and giving us kind of detailed information that's going on, which I didn't want to disclose on my channel. And so in all things down there, my mother, I should say my father and mother, they came to terms with what the proper things to do, and they have everything in order to kind of flow through this and get through the transition of my mother departing this physical world. And she was a Jesus Christ believer, very strong Christian, very church-going Christian. And so we all can only hope that we one day meet again. And that's the thing that we all can only hope in this physical world, that there is a spiritual afterlife for us to meet with Jesus if you believe in Jesus Christ. You may believe in somebody else. You may not believe in any of that. But I thought to myself, for Jesus Christ, he sacrificed his life to gain us another life and to gain us the connection of God. And that's where we have to just all come to closure in our life, that we someday will be in that same spiritual plane. And that's just the way this physical world has been designed for us to participate, and then we move on. But once again, it's easy to say that, but until you're the person that's in the shoes of like my father, Popcorn, it'll be challenging for him because it was such the relationship with a woman in his life that was every day of his life. And so I know that connection will be very challenging. For my sisters, they're strong. My brother's strong. And in the end, you don't want to see somebody suffer. And my mother was suffering terribly at the end. And we did everything we could, as people know that watch my channel. And my brother and sisters, I've already thanked them so much for taking good care of my mother, which I couldn't be there, but I was there. I mean, I did go and visit my mother, and I sacrificed a lot. For those that watch my channel, you don't really know me on that level because I didn't have a YouTube channel my whole life. But my goal always was, with my daughter Julia, was to know her grandparents. And I hear so many stories of so many people that do not know who their grandparents are. And it's just so incredible. even to me, it's sad for me that my father's mother died very young with diabetes in her 50s. I was too small. I was only like 3-4 years old. It was like 1970. So I guess I was been 7 years old at that time. But she lived up there in Illinois, near Chicago. And, my dad was a full-time worker, so we didn't have time to go spend time. And then his father, who passed in 1982, of October 1982, I kind of knew him, but not really, because same thing. We just didn't spend a lot of time in Illinois. We spent most of our time in Tennessee, where my mother was the last born of a farmer that tried 5 times to have a boy. And my mother was the last born. That my mother's mother, my grandmother, Effie, was her name, Effie. She had a lot of native Indian in her, and she was actually a school teacher in a home at that time, in the early 1900s, mid-1900s. She was a caretaker for the family. But for my grandfather, Clarence, he was a stubborn as all get out. And he was, believe it or not, his stepbrother, Lon Scott, became a congressman in Tennessee. He was a very successful graduate of West Point. And he had an incredibly successful, well-to-do, affluent career, and through military, and then eventually being a congressman for the state of Tennessee. In contradiction, my mother's father, Clarence, he dropped out of high school, and he was just a poor old farmer, a poor old cotton picking farmer. That my mother grew up picking cotton down there in southern Tennessee, Savannah, Tennessee, down there near Memphis. And now my phone's ringing. It'll probably be like my wife or something. So I may have to take this. Let's see who's calling me, everybody. And it is. And so I'll call her back here in a few minutes because I want to get this wrapped up because I got a busy day and I'll lose my thought process and everything else. So for my mother, she grew up in a very poor family. She grew up in the sticks. She grew up in a house with no water, no heat, no air conditioning, no bathroom. They lived off the well. They lived off the outhouse, and so she lived a very poor life. And since she was the 5th born, her oldest sister at that time was embarrassed back in that time that her mother would get pregnant at that age. So in some ways, her oldest sister, who became very successful in the small town of Savannah there, she was embarrassed in so many ways of my mother because of her, she just thought that wasn't right. And so, but for my mother never had like the real relationship with her father because her father was just so disappointed that 5 times, not one boy, and he needed the working hands of boys to help him farm to be able to survive. But also my mother's second oldest sister, Ann, so she had Nell, who's her oldest, and then Ann, she moved off to Nashville, Tennessee, and she met this incredibly talented guy named Walt Vincent that was going to be a professional baseball player for the Boston Red Sox, but then he got drafted into the war. And on D-Day, and being over there in France, he got shrapnel in his eye, and that ruined his career to be a professional baseball pitcher. He was going to be a pitcher. Big, tall guy, funny. All he wanted to do is play. But what that story is for my mother, it brought my mother out of dire straits of living in the rural country of nothing beyond nothing. And her sister Ann invited her to Nashville, Tennessee, when she came out of middle school, or she went into college. And so my mother, at a very young age, left her parents to live with her sister, where her sister gave her a glimmer of hope that she'd have a life and would get educated. And that was a huge thing for my mother. It was blessed. And so then, to fast forward, this is when my mother met my father at a dance. When my father was in the Air Force, they used to call it the Army Air Guard. And my mother and father met in Nashville, Tennessee, all because of her sister, Ann. that brought her there, that created what you now listen to a guy named Iceman ramble along. And, there's a lot more to the story of my mother, but it turned into a very long, long thing. But I just want to kind of give a little overview. And what's interesting is my mother outlived all her sisters. She outlived her mother. And I think her dad outlived her. I think my Clarence, I think he lived till 94, I think. And I think that Effie, she died back in the 80s. And I just can't remember that. It's just kind of a blur right there. And they have a burial down there in Savannah, Tennessee, with her Reba, her other daughter, with Pauline, her other daughter. And then Nell, I'm just trying to think about Nell. I think she's right there too. Yeah, she is in the same cemetery down there in good old rural Savannah, Tennessee. And Pauline was one daughter that was had issues, had physical and mental issues. So I only knew her a short time. Reba passed. So for my mother, it's pretty incredible that she outlived all of her sisters. And I think by 4 or 5 years. I think most of her sisters died in like their mid to late 80s. And so anyway, just kind of recognized my mother this morning, who's passed. And there's so much more to the story of her life. As all of you, I'm sure, have a mother and father that have passed. And you can relate so well to what goes on once you lose somebody. And it takes time for it to set in. That's kind of what happens in life. When you lose something, you don't really instantly feel it. You don't feel that loss of connection. But then over time, you're like, wow, I lost something. And so, and so that's for me. Even for me, I just know that this has become much more emotional for me as time progresses. And, it just starts to sink in more, because it's just like anything. You lose something, at first, you're like, yeah, okay. But then over time, you're like, wow, what did I lose? I lost my mother's voice, and always her compassion and her guidance and her support. She always supported me through the good and the bad. And we did have differences, but in the end, we always came to the same, which is so cool that I was blessed to have a mother that was so loving, that could overcome the challenges of the failures and the things that you do in life as you're growing up that aren't always really the best of things that you should have done and you regret you've done. But when you have a mother and father that still respect you and care about you and still love you, that's just incredibly powerful. So what I was thinking to myself last night was the sacrifice. And you think about a mother or father, the sacrifice, until you've done that, you probably just won't relate to it. But until you're a mother or father, you understand the sacrifice you have to have and give. And it's very challenging. And a lot of people can't do it. I mean, some people just raise their hands and the kids leave. They don't speak to each other anymore. You have differences of views and ideas. I mean, you hear these stories all the time of children no longer interact with their parents. And once again, I was blessed to have a mother and father that sacrificed so much for their children. And we kept the family together through the good and the bad. Because like anybody else, we've had the good and the bad. But I was thinking about how the sacrifices of what us humans that we do, especially as a parent, it's until you raise a child, you just will relate with that so much more. And everybody here, I'm sure, can tell these stories as well. But I thought that with what's going on in our country right now, are we being sacrificed? I mean, and I'm not going to get in a lot to the politics today and the state of times, because it just isn't really the mindset that I'm in right now with the loss of my mother. But I just think to myself, wow, we're being sacrificed like never ever seen. It's incredible. Everything's going to be more expensive. And I know everybody sit here and start pounding their fists that Donald Trump's going to make everything right and everything's going to be okay. And I'm just like, yeah, but you're going to pay through the roof. Maybe not. Maybe I'm all wrong, which I could be all wrong, and I'll accept all that. But I can't taste it. I mean, I'm thinking, wow. But it's okay. But here, I'll wrap it up with this. I called one of my good friends that owns a local motorcycle dealership, and they're on fire. Their business is on fire. They had the best March ever on record of being in business. So if anybody's following the legacy media and it's telling you people are pulling back, that doesn't seem to be the case. In fact, what the conversation was, people are calling wanting to know if they should buy a motorcycle today rather than later because of the price increases. So many people are flocking to the dealership, just as I predicted, that you better go grab that car, motorcycle, whatever it may be, as fast as possible because these tariffs are going to make everything so expensive. So in so many ways, it's the pandemic all over again. And even a Wall Street Journal article was talking about, one of the journalists said that he's now getting phone calls for his nice used Honda SUV vehicle. Yeah, car dealerships are already calling him, begging him to give up his car so they can have something to sell that's affordable for people to be able to afford. So it's all happening. And once again, it's no, get out of there. No. You always got to be eating something. We'll be sacrificed once again, everybody, for what somebody thinks is right versus wrong and how it all plays out in the end. Hey, for me, it'd be a beautiful thing that if everything got really expensive, because everything I own will be more valuable. But the real question is, when everything does get real expensive, is that when the lights turn off? I mean, that's when I'm going to be stumped more than ever. One of my friends 6 months from now, a year from now, tell me their business is booming like never ever seen, even though everything is much more expensive. And I'll be like, wow, people are going to step it up, and they're going to even spend even more money because they just have more money. I don't know. But that's it. I'm not getting too much further than that. Mother this morning, just recognized my mother, the passing, and I appreciate anybody out there that will make comments and support, and I do appreciate that, who's been very supportive of my family. And so yeah, I have to leave it at that. So hope everybody has a great day, blessed day, and stay tuned for more stories and conversations on Ice Age TV.